questions through the chat room. Before we begin, just to say that there's another group starting with Edith Forbes, and it's classical music, either the playing of classical music or the listening to classical music. So you can contact Edith through the website in the normal way so it's a classical music group which is starting up. So if you have a look at the website, and if you're interested, send a wee note through the normal way, through the pigeon, if you're interested in classical music. Obviously, it would be on Zoom at the moment. So that's where we are. So Emma, I'll just hand over to you and let you take us through your talk.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for allowing me to come this morning and talk to you about what Shelter Scotland does here in Glasgow and kind of the rest of Scotland as well. So I'm going to share my screen, so please bear with me while I set up the technology. Let me just see if I can. Can everyone see just the hello screen?
Yes.
And you can't see any notes at the side. Well, I've had some technical difficulties.
I can't see any notes at the side.
That's fine. I had my boyfriend like frantically trying to help me this morning. Perfect. So as I said, I'm going to just like shut my video down at the side so I can't see your faces. So if you're sticking out your tongues or making any silly faces, I can't see that. So my name's Emma. I am the Regional Community Fundraiser for Shelter Scotland here in Glasgow. I work to encourage schools, businesses and individuals to engage with Shelter Scotland and fundraise for us to support the work that we do here. And I'm going to talk to you about what we do throughout this talk. And Shelter Scotland is the leading housing charity, and we hope to help people who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless, who live in bad housing situations. And I'm going to tell you the reason why I work for Shelter Scotland. So here I am, aged 8 years old, and little did I know that my life was about to change, but for the worse. My mum and dad split up just a little after that, after turning 8 years old. We moved into a one-bedroom flat where my brother and I shared a room, and my mum sat on the sofa, and it was absolutely riddled with darkness, and it was stinking, it was awful. We had nowhere to play outside, it wasn't safe or secure for us. And then my mum was offered a two-bedroom flat at Annie's Land, and we thought it was like the best thing ever. And my mum got into a really bad situation with her current boyfriend, and he was abusive, he didn't like us. There was also drug and alcohol abuse in the mix of that as well. And one day I came home at age 10 to all my stuff basically being put into black bags, and I was homeless. My brother stayed with my mum, but I had to go, and I walked 7 miles to my grandparents' house with my black bags, with everything that I had. And if it hadn't have been for them, I would have potentially become homeless and had to have slept in the streets because I didn't know where else to go. And a study conducted by the Scottish Government from April to March last year to this year showed that over 31,000 households were assessed as homeless in Scotland. And that was made up of 35,000 adults and 15,000 children. And this means a child becomes homeless every 33 minutes. And homelessness can have a huge consequence for children and young people across almost all areas of their lives, from health to education. Homelessness leaves many children unable to realise their potential for years to come. And these factors have been proven to get worse the longer a child is without a safe home. But I was one of those lucky children who had grandparents who stepped in and basically became my mum and dad. And this is the reason why I work for Shelter. I've been that family that lives in cramped and awful conditions, and that's why we need your support so that children today and in the future don't have to go through what I went through. And as I said, over 14,000 children were assessed as being homeless in Scotland in 2018 and 19, and that would fill almost 180 double-decker buses to capacity. 66,000 households are overcrowded in Scotland, and over 1 in 10 households are affected by dampness and condensation, and over 613 households are in fuel poverty. And this has increased as of late because if people aren't getting their full pay packet, some families or individuals are choosing whether they pay their rent or put their gas and electricity on or pay their food bill that week. And last year, our helpline answered over 13,000 calls. Shelter Scotland We had new figures released this year, and the annual homelessness statistics published by the Scottish Government show that 31,000 households were assessed as homeless, and that was a 4% increase. And every 17 minutes, a house becomes homeless in Scotland. There are over 11,000 households in temporary accommodation, and that was a 6% increase in numbers of the previous year. And that includes the 7,000 children that are in temporary accommodation, and that was a 7% increase. And it's the highest number on record that we've had. And it's set to get worse because the coronavirus and this pandemic has left people fighting for their jobs, left in awful situations with their housing and accommodation. So what do? Now you know about the problem. Shelter Scotland is a national charity helping people with bad housing and homelessness. We have Shelter England, but we work differently because of the law system here. And I work within our Glasgow hub normally. The pandemic has obviously seen our Glasgow hub close, where we offer that face-to-face support to people. And we actually used to have a drop-in service on Monday, Wednesday and Friday that anyone could walk in and seek help from our specialised team. The aim of our hub is to be the heart of their communities and basis for activism, as well as helping for people for support. The hub develops relationships, build trust, and help to focus on local energy with groups and organisations and individuals to help us build that change and contribute to the national change. Alongside the helpline staff in the hub, we also have dedicated housing specialists who work to support people with homelessness, renting issues, money and debt issues, and benefits. And alongside them, we also have our in-house lawyer team who go to court to fight for people and their rights to a safe home. We're there basically to rescue, protect, support, and empower people. We make sure that people know their rights. We give them the right information so that if a private landlord is pushing back on things like not fixing, repairs, etc., we can give them directly that information that they need to go back to them and say, no, I'm entitled to this. This is the law. And we do that through our online chat facility. People come on maybe for a few minutes just to find out that information so that they can copy and paste it and put it into an email straight back and hopefully get that issue solved. The law service team are made up of 8 solicitors and 2 lay representatives who provide free legal advice and representation to people who have housing issues across Scotland. And they cover evictions, mortgage repossessions, homelessness, dampness and disrepair, and unlawful evictions and abandonments. They provide that advice and attend court to help people keep their homes. And we have solicitors based in Edinburgh, Glasgow, and the Dundee hubs. And like I said, we have hubs in Glasgow and in Edinburgh, but we also have them in Dundee and Aberdeen. And that is where our helpline, our online chat facility, and usually the face-to-face teams sit most days. We also have a service in Glasgow and in Edinburgh called Time for Change, which is peer-led model working with people who have that lived experience of homelessness. They collect feedback and we have listened to their experience, and this really helps shape what Shelter Scotland does for people who are living in those awful conditions and who are homeless, because what better way to put a model in place than to listen to people who have actually lived it. The Time for Change volunteers are still going out day to day doing their street walks and seeing those people who are street begging. And we spoke to Andrew, who's one of our volunteers in Edinburgh last week. He came to one of our team meetings and he gave us an update that he had done a street walk along Princes Street last week, and he came across a pregnant woman who was out begging, and he was like, oh, what's happening here? Sat down to speak to her, and it turns out she wasn't homeless, but she was out begging because her benefits had been stopped because of one issue to the other, and she didn't have enough money to pay for her pay-as-you-go meter for her gas and electricity. So she was out begging basically to put on the heating that night. And he was able to find out who our provider was, able to phone them for her, explain the situation, and he made sure that she actually had a warm house to go home to that night. We also fight for people's rights here. We're living in a housing crisis And as I said earlier on, every 17 minutes a house becomes homeless in Scotland, and the private rented sector has tripled since 1999. And we have had campaigns that basically fight for it to become a human right in Scotland to have a safe and secure home, because at this moment in time, it is not in Scots law that it's your basic human right to have a safe and secure house. We actually have a campaign at the moment called Build Scotland's Future, where we're asking the government to invest in more social housing to ensure everyone in Scotland has a safe, warm and affordable home. We're trying to get as many signatures as we can, and we basically need 15,000 signatures so that this is discussed at Scottish Parliament in the future. And I think we're sitting at just over 10,000 at the moment. So what I'll do at the end of the chat, I'll put the petition in and you can just go online and sign it. The more signatures we get, the better chance that we have of getting Nicola Sturgeon to discuss this with our Parliament for the next before the next election, basically. One of our probably most famous campaigns that happened last year was the People versus Glasgow City Council, where we put in a motion to take Glasgow City Council to court, because every council has a legal duty to find housing for every homeless person. But on 3,365 occasions, Glasgow City Council last year failed to do this. And during that time, 47 homeless people died as a result of that in Glasgow. And we were going to take them to court, and basically the Scottish Housing Association stepped in to basically say, right, we'll conduct a survey and a report, and we'll come back with you on our findings. And last week, the report on that inquiry has been published, and the report confirms that the failure of Glasgow Homelessness Service here in Glasgow City Centre. They basically said that the council services for people experiencing homelessness pre-pandemic did not fit the needs, and they did not have enough suitable temporary accommodation to basically put people in to get them off the streets. The report reflects some positive developments, such as it brought in 17 new staff, which have hired in recent months to increase the number of people who are there to help get those people off of the streets and into temporary accommodation. So hopefully over the next year, we will work with Glasgow City Council to ensure that they have the right information, the right resources to make sure that those people who are living on the streets who want to get off have that support. And how we've been working during lockdown. Like everyone else, I've spent most of my time at home, and our helpline, our online chat facility, and most of the Shelter Scotland staff have been at home. Our shops had to close during the first lockdown, and 6 o'clock this Friday, the shops will shut again in Glasgow, which is a huge blow. And I found out yesterday that it costs us £100,000 to keep those shops closed for 3 weeks. So it's going to be a huge blow to our income over the next couple of weeks. It's our busiest time. People come to us during Christmas time to get some presents, donate items before Christmas hits as well. So we're really going to struggle. And what's coming up? So we've got our new event called The Big Walk, where we're asking individuals or families in their bubble to get out on December the 10th, and you can choose to walk 3k, 5k or up to 10k in your local community, obviously staying within our region. And you can walk basically with your friends, your family, or even just your dog. And I'm taking part, so I live up next to the West Highland Way, and I was looking at my route this morning, and I can pretty much do a 10k in about 3 hours. There's a huge big lock next to me as well, so hopefully it'll be a dry day and myself and the dog can get out and do the big walk. And how you can get involved. So really telling your friends and family about what Shelter does. Our biggest thing is people don't actually know what it is we do. We provide people with that shelter, with the houses, but we're really there to be that information and fighting for people's rights. You can take part in one of our events, such as the Big Walk, and I can put more information about that as well into the chat afterwards. You could organise your own event. Once our shops open back up, you could have a big clear out and donate our items to our shops. We've got loads in and around Glasgow, and we're always looking for volunteers at our shops when we open up. We've actually had a pop-up shop at the Glasgow Fort the last couple of weeks, which was due to close at the end of December. And I've been going to work there every second Thursday from 2 till 6, and I've absolutely loved it. Getting to speak to the public about what we do, speaking to our volunteers that's in the shop, and really just getting myself out of the house and getting away from my desk for a couple of hours. It's been really fantastic, and I've really enjoyed it. So I probably will volunteer once the shops open back up. And that's me. So if anyone has any questions, if you want to pop it into the chat, or if you want to take yourself on mute and ask me a question.
Thank you very much, Emma. Opportunity now for us to ask questions from Emma, to make comments, to say what we think in terms of being involved. And here's a question coming up from Irene. To what extent has the private sector can't read the rest of that. Irene?
I think it says, to what extent has the private sector contributed in building social housing? So
Okay.
our director has been meeting with loads of private landlord companies such as like Clyde, etc., to talk to them about houses that are sitting there and like with nobody in them. How can they work better together? So this is part of our wider discussion to ensure that not only are we working with local councils to ensure social housing is built, but also that private sector as well, because if we don't kind of come together, it's the problem is only going to get worse. And as we know, there's so many properties. I mean, there's been one lying across the road from me with a to let sign up for absolutely ages, and someone who's living in temporary accommodation could have been in that even for a short period of time. So hopefully we're working together to ensure that we all come together to stop this issue getting worse.
You mentioned Glasgow City Council. Are you able to name and shame other councils who are either better or worse in relation to addressing the homelessness issue?
I think, to be honest, most councils are just as bad as each other, to be honest. I've been on the helpline call, like listening in, when like a local authority near me has came up as an issue, and that person was basically getting chucked out of their, my goodness, what's it called? Like their temporary accommodation, and the council were like washing their hands of that person. And it took our housing advisor to phone them and say, it is your legal duty to make sure this person, if they're getting chucked out at 12 from one place, that by night time they need to have someone else. It is your legal duty. And they've got almost like template emails ready to hit send. They've got letters ready to email to them or post to them if need be to really enforce that. Certainly I work with our Edinburgh fundraiser really closely, and it's just as bad. And up in Aberdeen and Dundee, we will work with the hubs. That's why the hubs are there, because there needs to be that presence, and almost like we are there on the ground to ensure that the councils don't forget that we are there to make sure people don't, they have that access to that information, and make sure that they have that empowerment to say, no, I'm entitled to this. This is what my legal rights are.
Can I just ask, do councils not have homelessness officers then?
They do, but it sits within teams, and like everything else, they are so strapped for resources. So just for talking's sake, I live in Eastern Bartonshire, and I don't know how many staff they have who are dedicated to that, but it might be 2 or 3, and they might be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of interaction that comes from the public. And it's not necessarily that they are homeless, but it might be that they're living in awful conditions, they're living in cramped conditions, they're like living 3 or 4 different people are living in a 1-bedroom flat. So there's multiple issues that they have to probably deal with. And I think it's down to the councils not employing enough member of staff to deal with the sheer volume of inquiries that come in.
Emma, what would you like the Scottish Government Parliament, what could they do to alleviate the situation?
I think they have to kind of look at the overall, like the bad housing, the private landlords who are getting away with murder, basically, like allowing people to live in awful situations. They need to listen to us with the need for more social housing, but also I would love for like Nicola Sturgeon or some of the cabinet to come in and actually listen to the phone calls that we get in the helpline and listen to people who are literally like at their wit's end. They don't know what to do. Some people come to shelter as a last result. They don't know what else to do. So for me, I think to open up their eyes a little bit as to just the grand scale of what homelessness is, and how easy it is for people to slip under the radar or slip into that situation. So I think it's like educating them. So we do work really closely with other charities as well as the Scottish Government to try and just bring to light to them what it actually is. I mean, we were living in a housing crisis before this pandemic even hit. So we were waiting almost like at the cliff edge for furlough to end in October because we didn't know what that's going to look like for people who were on a reduced wage, were they going to get made redundant. So it was that kind of, is it going to get worse? Is it going to get better? And we're now seeing more people coming to us for that help who never thought in their wildest dreams they would ever need our help. I spoke to one of our advisors last week who said that she had a woman on the phone who had a great job, would normally shop in Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose for a weekly shop, but she lost her job as a result of the pandemic and she didn't know what her rights were, what she was entitled to, what benefits she could get. She's like, I've never had to claim anything like this before. She's like, I've really just been in the dark about this. So she came to us for that help and support. And she said to us, like, once she'd paid all her bills, she was left with like £37 left of her monthly like money to do her with her gas and electricity. So it's people who have never needed our help that are coming to us now, and it's only going to get worse as this pandemic continues.
Okay.
Sorry, Peter. Can I ask, do you think that the huge expansion of Airbnb has had an effect? Because obviously it's almost from the top down, but certainly in cities like Edinburgh where it's a major problem. And I mean, does it need legislation or extra taxation or something like that? I guess we're all guilty of going to Spain or wherever and hiring an Airbnb and not really thinking of the consequences. Obviously, people are doing it all the way to Scotland as well. It's a bit of a rhetoric question. I think it certainly has an influence, but is there anything can we do about that?
I think it probably does need more legislation behind it because there isn't really a lot behind it, and people are snapping up properties that probably could go to people who are less fortunate and aren't able to get onto the property ladder, aren't able to even get into the private renting sector as well. So I think it was a huge increase in that, certainly over the last couple of years, but I think Glasgow City Council they've tried to slow that down with the private kind of Airbnb stuff. Certainly Edinburgh, there's more of that going on than here in Glasgow. So hopefully, as a result of what's been going on, maybe these properties might come back to the council or back into private renting sector, and with the kind of legislation maybe coming into place in the future, who knows, that we can work to ensure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Also see in the chat, how big a factor are 0-hour contracts? It is a huge factor for us. We have a lot of people coming to us because they just, 1 minute they've got a job and then the next minute they don't. And the guy that I was talking to earlier on who works at Time for Change as our volunteer, he was on a 0-hour contract working in a pub. So he started from his fiancée. He left her at the house. He made himself homeless, basically, to make sure that she had somewhere to live, and had a 0-hour contract, was still at university trying to get his degree, but the hostel that he was staying in wouldn't allow him to basically, he had to be home by a certain time in this hostel. So I think he had to be home for like 10 o'clock at night. So working in a pub, that doesn't work. So he had to take the day shifts, which weren't as good for tips. He couldn't get them as often. And as a result of it being a 0-hour contract, he was made redundant. And then as a result of that, everything spiraled from there. And he then had to basically go and speak to the council and declare himself officially homeless. And yeah, that was all because of a 0-hour contract, and the rules and kind of regimented from the hostel as well, which is just awful.
I see another question on the chat about cooperation, is it between shelter and citizens advice?
We work really closely with all these types of organisations to ensure that they're giving out the right information, as are we. So often people come to us and we might not be the right charity or information place for that person. We signpost a lot of people to say, actually, you need to go and talk to Citizens Advice or Women's Aid or Bethany Christian. There's loads of different charities and organisations that we work really closely with. It might not be that we're the right fit when we listen to that person's question and then we signpost them on to someone else.
Okay. Peter, you had a question?
Yeah, so you mentioned that there's a campaign and a consultation going on about making housing a human right, and along with other new rights. And yet homeless people are already supposed to have the right to be housed under the Homelessness Act, and which, as you said, isn't really working out. Do you think it would make a big difference to get that basic right?
Oh, 100%. So last year, it was actually last December that we had the campaign Are You With Us, to basically take it to government to get the basic human right to have a safe and secure home discussed at Parliament. And we made the 15,000 signatures. So we're still waiting for that to be discussed at Parliament, and it's not been brought up yet. So hopefully, as things, like, we were kind of waiting for Parliament to go back in September and October kind of time, and we thought, right, it's going to be discussed then, but it just hasn't. So we have a campaign team who are almost like just sitting, like nipping the heads of the government constantly. So hopefully it'll be discussed soon, but we have had those 15,000 signatures to show that the public are behind us, that it should be a basic human right for a safe and secure home, but it's not. It's just awful.
Yeah, I think for me the issue is about the safe, because there's a lively discussion at our book group the other day. We were reading a book based in the 19th century and about a lot of the social engineering, about putting, if you like, people who had various problems all together in one community, making everybody's problems worse. And I think that's what's tended to happen very much in the past, and I don't know if it's still happening, giving people the poorest housing and making their lives no better, really. You know, they might have had a roof over their head, but they weren't safe.
I mean, that's what I experienced when I was younger. I just remember, like, where we lived, it was just an awful, awful area, an awful street. Like, didn't want to go out. My mum wouldn't let us go out and play in the street because it wasn't safe. And like, even like the close, or like the tenement flat, even that wasn't safe. Like, doors were being kicked in, and again, you're housing people with multiple issues all in the one place. So it's almost like a ticking time bomb ready to go off. I actually speak quite a lot, well, pre-pandemic at primary schools, and when I talk about homelessness and what I've went through, you see children kind of trying to understand that. And I've been in so many classes across different areas of Glasgow and the West, and kind of really deprived areas. And you see little kids put their hands up at the end, and sometimes it's like, oh, I've been to a charity shop, or oh, I've gave a homeless person some money, and you're like, that's lovely, like, thanks very much, or like, thanks for putting something into our shop. But sometimes you'll get that one kid who has maybe been experiencing that and felt stigma from his classmates. And I had one little boy put his hand up over in the kind of East End of Glasgow, and he was like, that's me, I'm homeless, and he started telling his story to the whole class, and I'm sitting kind of going to the teacher like, help me, what's going on? But she was like, no, keep going. And at the end, she told me he had never discussed that with his classmates, but obviously at the end he felt that maybe they would understand and not like tease him for it going forward, because they had learned as a class what it meant to be homeless and that it can happen to anyone. And yet it's really about educating young people and telling students. I speak to university students as well. Like last night I was with the Stirling Law Society, again, just to kind of tell them what they're entitled to and that we're here if they're ever in that situation. That's what shelter's for. And if we can have one person in that room or in that class go home and say to someone, do you know that shelter have a helpline or an online chat facility, or you could go in and see them, I've done my job.
And that's Ken. Unfortunately, workers' rights and contracts will become worse once we leave the EU. Is that a fact? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, it's just at that cliff edge that we've all been kind of almost like gearing up closer to. It's like the pandemic, then furlough, and then leaving the EU. We just don't know kind of when that cliff edge is going to come and what's going to be the result for those living here with working 0-hour contracts. How's it going to affect housing stuff going forward? So we're kind of waiting to see what happens, but we're almost like poised, ready for the kind of the second wave of people who need us and really coming to us for that help and support.
And is the Scottish Government, is the Parliament in charge of housing, or is the Westminster Government in charge of housing, or a bit of both? Because we're in Scotland, it's our Scottish Government. Right. So like Shelter England would rely on Parliament to. Right. Okay. Because that's like a lot of people are just like, oh, Shelter, but we're actually two charities under the one umbrella because of. Right. Scottish law and English law, they're completely different. They're different, right, okay. So it's Shelter Scotland, right, okay, thank you. Very informative. Any other questions from people?
I guess my last one really is there any kind of best practice models internationally that we in Scotland should be looking to?
I don't know. I don't know if we look kind of around the world to see what someone else has done or how they've kind of got themselves out of that crisis. But I know the Time for Change model is really how we are trying to model our Scottish charity on that, because it's not actually done down south at all. Time for Change is just Glasgow and just Edinburgh at this moment in time. So it listens to those people who have that lived experience to say, this is what we should be doing, this is what the government needs to be doing, this is what the services need to look like. Because if we listen to someone who's never had that experience, we're never going to learn, and we're going to be putting things in place that they turn around and say to us, that doesn't work, or that's never going to work. So we really listen to those people to shape what our strategy is going forward, what our priorities are, and how we help and support people. So I think we listen to our own people, and people help people, and yeah, hopefully with that model we'll be hopefully setting the bar for the rest of the UK, and the world will look to Scotland to say, actually, that's how they did it, let's learn from them. Okay. Any other comments?
Oh, can I just say, Liz and Emma, I for one, and I'm sure there's quite a few others here, will be up for the walk.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what
you're going to do that? Yeah.
What should we do to support? What can we best do as EU3A to support you? Obviously, to let people know that you exist and spread the word. And Ken is in charge of our walking group, and we could do the walk. We could do it all separately, or two or whatever. That wouldn't be. It's around the 10th, which is
and you don't have to specifically do it on the 10th if it's absolutely stoating off the ground, as I would say, or like lashing with rain. I don't think I'll be doing it that day. I might do it the day after if it's a bit drier.
Yeah, but you could do it that Thursday or Friday around that time. And the idea would be that we would get sponsorship in order to make a contribution to yourselves. So Ken, as walking convener, do you think that would be something you could put, or would we just put it out to all the members?
I think put it out to all the members. I could also put the walking group as well, although obviously because of COVID, we can't have an organised walk.
Appreciate that.
It's an individual, or I think when there's strict rules in, I'm not sure what they are now.
You can walk in twos.
We can walk in twos. Yeah,
I think.
To the arc, yes. Yeah.
I've just put the link, Ken, to the big walk. So if you want to have a wee read at it, and you can send it out to everyone or have a little look and decide what's best practice for you guys to do.
Yeah.
You get a lovely winter thick red big walk hat, which I was modelling beautifully in the outside the West Highland Way arch in Mulgai Town Centre, trying to take a selfie before everyone walked past me in the background, thinking I was crazy.
Yeah, we could definitely participate in that. And
if anyone has any animal or any dogs, we do have dog bandanas as well, which you can request for the dog to also take part. Mine wasn't a fan of it, to be honest, but who knows, yours might.
Yep, get my dog into his dog bandana. He usually gets a Christmas one, so the shelter one could be quite good. Are there other things? I mean, your shops presumably, hopefully, will reopen again on the 11th of December. So presumably, what sort of things are you looking to for contributions for your charity shop?
We're always looking for books, any bric-a-brac stuff like glasses or anything like that you're maybe doing a clear out before more stuff comes into the house at Christmas. That's what I always kind of tend to do. Usually like my first week of December is kind of get the tree up, the clear out, because always more stuff comes in and you're always trying to find somewhere else to put that. So yeah, just a general, if you're clothes, we're always looking for one thing we always seem to lack of is men's shoes, and just from me being in the shop, they're always looking for men's shoes. Women's shoes we've always got an abundance of, but men's stuff is usually something that we don't have as much of. And yeah, so I was in the Glasgow Fort for the last couple of weeks, and it's just interesting to see actually what is the stuff that goes quicker and what's the stuff that they actually don't have as much of, and it's men's shoes. So a shout out for any guys that are needing a clear out.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you don't do clothes.
Yeah, we do. We're always looking for like jumpers, jackets that we can sell on. We don't. A lot of people come to us and say, "Oh, can I bring bedding or sleeping bags?" Or we don't take any of that stuff. Unfortunately, it would probably need to go to Glasgow City Mission. They take some of that stuff as well. Normally for their winter night shelters, but they're not doing that this year because of coronavirus. It was actually the winter night shelter was funded last year to stay open till March just because of what was going on at the start of the year. But as a result of that, they actually saw the coronavirus spreading really quickly between people who were using the night shelter. So unfortunately, they're not doing that. But the other side, they're trying to get people into hotels and hostels that are in and around Glasgow City Centre, again, just with winter coming up again. Yeah,
my understanding was that the City Mission was trying to get people from the 1st of December into hotels because the hotels are sitting empty.
Yeah, 100%.
And in the city centre, that's my understanding. I'm not sure. I don't even know if they take bedding anymore. I think bedding is a really hard thing to get rid of.
Yeah, it's something that people always like, they'll shove in at the bottom of their ration bag, and unfortunately we just can't do anything with it.
Yeah, for all sorts of reasons that can be done. Somebody has put on the Scottish Homelessness Act used to be seen as international best practice. Sad here that it's not being put into practice, and that is very sad indeed. So
it's a comment. There's just a comment.
Yeah, it's a comment, but I know it's really interesting that the comments can be there and the legislation can be there, but it's not always followed through. But we as a U3A can take part in the big walk, shelter walk, and hopefully donate things to your shops once that gets reopened again. And just contributions, financial contributions, I assume, are always welcome. And we had put on the newsletter ways that you can, just give directly to shelter. You put on your bank details, so we can do that. The newsletter that Anne sent out a few weeks back has got that included, and we can do that again. We can send that out again if people have lost the letter or whatever, the newsletter. We can send out that link.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. And if anyone has any further questions or anything they want more information on, Helen and Peter have my email address, so just drop me a line and I can forward on anything else.
Thank you very much. Before we close, anybody get any other questions before Emma goes?
I just want to say it was a great talk. Thank you, Emma.
Yes, I would agree. Thank you. Very informative. Thank you very much indeed. That was great. Great in the sense that it's very informative. Very sad to hear that it's not something that we seem to be coping with in Scotland in the 21st century, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? It's there, and we need to address it. And the more people that know about it, the better.
Yeah,
so thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. It feels like Helen and I have been discussing it for a long time, but that's finally.
Right. That's right, you were meant to do it a year ago. That's right.
Yeah. So
okay.
no, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks everybody. And remember we'll send out more information about how you can give, and also just be supportive and put the 10th, 11th of December in your walking diary, and we can do some sponsorship for that. All the very best, Emma, and thanks a lot to everybody. Okay.
Thank you. Enjoy the sunshine, everyone.
Yes, enjoy the sunshine. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.